When you read a book, you are only seeing the surface. Characters, plot, and setting form a top layer that often obscures the hidden systems and invisible rules actively operating beneath the prose. Literary theory provides the framework for identifying these systems. For most students preparing for the UGC NET English exam, the primary obstacle is the attempt to memorize hundreds of complex theorists and concepts as a giant, disconnected vocabulary list. This approach ignores the reality that these 5 core theories are actually a continuous conversation. Every new thinker is reacting to and arguing with the perceived flaws of the scholars who came before them. Tracking how this intellectual conversation evolved shows how each specific term emerged as a solution to a previous problem. This historical context makes the overwhelming vocabulary of the exam easier to categorize and retain. Modern theory begins with the search for order. In the mid-20th century, structuralism treated literature as a predictable system, governed by the same rigid scientific rules found in linguistics. Ferdinand de Saussure, the father of linguistics, proposed that language functions as a closed mathematical system of signs. Saussure broke language into components: the signifier, which is the physical word or sound, and the signified, the mental concept it represents. His crucial insight was that meaning is generated entirely through binary oppositions. We understand light only because we can contrast it with its opposite, dark. Structuralists used these binaries to lock a text into a stable center of meaning. They believed a reader could mathematically deduce the meaning of a text through its structural components. Jacques Derrida led the post-structuralist rebellion that challenged this perfect, rigid foundation. This visual fracturing represents Derrida's concept of difference. He argued that a signifier never actually points to a concrete signified concept. It only points to another signifier in an endless chain. Because meaning is always deferred and unstable, texts contain inherent contradictions. Roland Barthes pushed this instability further with his concept, the death of the author. He argued that if the rules of language cannot fix a text's meaning, then the author's original intention is irrelevant, and the power of interpretation belongs to the reader. This collapse of universal linguistic rules proved that textual meaning is a shifting landscape rather than a fixed truth. If language itself cannot lock down meaning, we must look for the external forces that shape our interpretation. Often, that force is power. Marxist theory shifts the critical focus toward economic power and class struggle. Applying Karl Marx's ideas to literature involves examining how the economic base of a society dictates the nature of its art and stories. This is where we encounter hegemony, the process by which literature functions as an ideological apparatus. It works to make the values of the ruling class feel like the natural, inevitable order of the world. Once critics recognized that real-world power shapes the text, they began to ask which groups were being silenced or marginalized by that power. Feminist theory addresses this silence by examining patriarchy. Thinkers like Simone de Beauvoir asserted that gender is a social construction used to uphold male dominance, showing how literature can reinforce or challenge these gendered power dynamics. Post-colonial theory interrogates another massive power structure: global empire. These theorists analyze the impact of colonialism and its aftermath on cultural identity. Edward Said's concept of Orientalism explains how the West used literature to construct fictional stereotypes of the East. These representations were used to justify colonial domination within the pages of a book. The journey of literary theory moves from abstract linguistic rules to the interrogation of class, patriarchy, and colonialism. These 5 theories operate as concurrent, intercepting layers of analysis. A classic novel can be analyzed through all these layers simultaneously: linguistic binaries, class warfare, gender roles, or imperial bias. Success on the UGC NET depends on applying these frameworks to excerpts. The exam tests how theories reveal hidden meanings, not just definitions. Understanding the dialectical progression, from the search for structure to linguistic instability to power dynamics, allows you to logically narrow down correct answers when you encounter unfamiliar terms on test day. Adopting this deep analytical mindset prepares you to handle the specific, high-level application questions found on the actual exam. It transforms literary theory from a list to be memorized into a method for understanding how language and power construct reality.